This was the project that transformed Santos in 3 short years.
This project was really the GLNG of the 1980s.
It was the realisation that the purpose of the company was to find and commercialise oil. Santos was originally formed to find oil in the northern parts of South Australia, Northern Territory, but initially it was mostly gas they found, and that became the major focus of the company.
Well, the first oil was discovered in the Cooper Basin in 1970 in a field called Tirrawara, and it, together with 2 other smaller oil fields, weren't sufficiently large to justify a project. However, in 1978 we discovered oil in the Eromanga Basin in a field called Strzelecki through the Strzelecki No. 3 well, and that was the biggest onshore flow rate of oil in Australia at the time.
Not only the discovery of oil, but the discovery of good flows of oil. And that meant all of a sudden our focus changed direction, and we thought, well, if it can happen here, why can't it happen everywhere else? And it did. In all basins, and in the Cooper Basin as well, there are a series of layers, and they're usually of vastly differing ages. Now, the Permian is the oldest producing layer, and that produces the gas. But above that is the Jurassic, and that's called the Eromanga Basin, and that's where the oil is.
Well, we were actually drilling through those Jurassic sediments to get down to the Permian Basin. And with the discovery of Strzelecki 3, it gave us a whole new focus to look for oil in the Jurassic sediments.
By 1981, the explorers had found enough oil, and together with the liquids in the gas, we had a viable liquids project.
The liquids project encompassed 4 things: a massive expansion in field activities, wells, flow lines; secondly, a plant expansion at Moomba; third, a pipeline between Moomba and Stony Point, which is just north of Whyalla; and fourth, at Stony Point, a plant and a jetty. Of course, Stony Point was renamed Port Bonython in honour of the founding chairman of Santos, John Bonython.
The project was going to cost $1,400 million, and Santos had to borrow its share of that, which was the largest loan in South Australia at that time. In addition, we had to negotiate the contracts with the South Australian government for the development of it, and those 2 issues were related.
Well, from the government's perspective, of course, it meant a great deal of employment in the first instance, particularly during construction, and of course a royalty stream, which could have amounted to about 300 million, I understand, when the project got going.
One of the major components of the liquids project was the extraction of LPG from the gas, and we needed to have contracts to sell that LPG to give the project some certainty. Ultimately, we signed a 5-year contract with Idemitsu Kosan in Japan.
It turned out to be a huge project. There was not only the liquid plant at Moomba, but there was lots of development work associated in the field.
Well, the scale of the project was absolutely massive. I've come to learn in recent times that it was, at the time, it was second only to the Snowy Mountain scheme in the history of Australia, just to put things into perspective. So it was a massive project.
By 1982, with the amount of development drilling Santos was doing and the amount of exploration drilling Delhi was doing, it was by far the biggest onshore exploration program in Australia.
The liquid project almost doubled, probably doubled the size, the physical size of the Moomba plant. And that was taken up with gas slug catchers, a crude stabilisation plant, the liquid recovery plant itself, and some large oil storage facilities.
The major construction for the Liquids project started in 1982 and took place during that year. There was great excitement about that, including the time when Roger Goldsworthy, the then Deputy Premier and Minister for Mines and Energy, turned the first sod for the construction of the pipeline between Moomba and Stony Point.
Well, the liquids pipeline, which is about 659 kilometres from here to Moomba, was constructed of about 37,000 pipes which needed to be all welded and joined together and laid in the ground, and that work was completed amazingly within about a 12-month period.
The construction schedule was very tight, spending around $2 million a day, but we needed to keep it going because we needed the revenue from the oil flow.
One thing we did was had a model built of both the Moomba and the Port Bonython plants, a scale model of the plants that allowed the construction guys who couldn't understand a particular part of the plant to come and have a look at the model, take a photo, take a Polaroid photo, go back to the job and build it.
Port Bonython, we were busy constructing some storage tanks for receiving the first liquids from the liquids pipeline. There was also a fractionation plant being constructed and a 2.4 kilometre jetty, which is the longest jetty in South Australia and still is today.
Logistically, the project was massive. We flew in some major components in Flying Tiger 747s. The larger plant components were brought in by ship, with the largest of those being in excess of 250 tonnes.
The pace of construction was hectic. Bear in mind we were starting from ground zero on this project. We were building a brand new fractionation plant, constructing tanks, building a jetty from the land base out to an offshore platform. We were getting ready to load our first ship, which happened in 1983 via a submarine pipeline, whilst all this hectic construction activity was occurring.
The highlight for me was the fact that we undertook all of this construction work in and around a live operating gas plant without any significant incident. So from a safety perspective, it was extremely well done.
At the end of the liquids project, we had taken Santos from a purely gas company into one of the 10 largest companies listed in Australia, and we were exporting crude oil, LPG and other liquid products. It was a huge transformation for Santos, and one journalist described Santos as Australia's emerging energy giant.
Well, it was a bold and far-sighted step by the company. It was of massive importance to the state and indeed to the nation.
The legacy of this extraordinary project is evident in everything we do at Santos today. There is an entrenched attitude founded in our pioneering beginnings of looking at what's possible and then making it happen.
The Cooper Basin Liquids Project transformed Santos at a time when the investment of $1.5 billion was a huge sum of money. It's put in place infrastructure that is as vital today as it was 30 years ago. The people now are looking at the innovation, technology and skills to drive our business forward, but they can only do so off the back of that investment all those years ago.
At the opening of Port Bonython, a very senior executive from Shell International congratulated us on doing the project in 3 years. He said they would have taken 7. When I asked why we did it in 3, he said because you didn't know you couldn't do it.